Jutian, starting from the stand user. Chapter 1 SBR San Diego, 1890. Lu Chen's ears were filled with a cacophony of noises. He was certain he had failed in his extreme sports challenge. In that situation, there was absolutely no chance of him surviving. He struggled to open his eyes and found himself lying on a beach, surrounded by many people who looked like cowboys. It didn't look like these people were just cosplaying. Lu Chen realized that he must have traveled through time, and this was probably an era similar to the West. At this moment, Lu Chen realized that there seemed to be an extra door in his mind, dim and without light. It seemed that it could not be opened yet. How to use it still needed to be explored. Lu Chen straightened up and listened carefully to the conversations around him. He didn't know why, but he could understand what they were saying. Most of them were discussing how they would spend their $5,000 million. Some were worried about the $1,200 registration fee. Still others were bragging about their abilities. Lu Chen probably had some idea of what kind of world he was in, after all. He had read a lot of comics before. Without listening to the conversations of the passers-by, he walked straight to the registration point to confirm whether this was the world he knew. Young man from the East, are you here to sign up for the competition as well? There were several people from the East who participated in the competition before. The employee at the registration point chattered incessantly after seeing another young man from the East. He seemed to be very curious about the people from the mysterious East. I'm still saving money. $1,200 is really too expensive. It would be better if the registration fee could be lower. In fact, Lu Chen didn't have a penny. Winning would be $5,000 million. Mr. Steele spent a lot of money on this competition, so $1,200 is not too much. I heard that the officials in Congress also attach great importance to this event. The SBR will be a competition that will attract worldwide attention. There was a hint of encouragement in the employee's words, but in fact the registration fee had nothing to do with him. He just wanted to show off what he knew. After learning the exact information, Lu Chen decided not to participate in the SBR competition anymore, but to go directly to find the saint's body, hoping to get a substitute. The remains of the saint are the real purpose behind this competition, so Lu Chen does not need to participate in the competition and can go straight to the ultimate goal. The good news is that Lu Chen knows the approximate location of all the remains. Just as I was about to leave, a man with an iron ball hanging from his waist, a cowboy hat on his head, green paint on his lips, and a mouthful of gold teeth walked in. Lu Chen recognized this person at a glance, Jiro Zeppelin. The characters in JoJo are generally very distinctive. It can only be said that the stand users all have good taste. There was a sneaky man following behind Jello, who pretended to be curious and reached out to Jello's waist. Lu Chen stepped forward and grabbed his hand, and a few gold coins in his hand were thrown out. The man shouted at Lu Chen angrily, "Why are you meddling in other people's business?" He was not ashamed of his behavior at all, but instead blamed the person who disturbed him. Of course, Jello also noticed the man's little action, so he turned around and touched the thief with his hand, and the thief sat down on the ground. The thief yelled, "What's wrong with you guys? What do you want to do to me?" "I'm just curious about what's hanging around his waist." Jello ignored the thief's yelling and stretched out a hand to Lu Chen and said, "Jello, the man who is ready to win the championship. Are you ready to participate in the competition too? But the championship will definitely be mine." After shaking hands with him, Lu Chen replied, "My name is Lu Chen, and I don't have any idea about the championship of the competition," because he was not planning to participate in the competition at all. That's a smart idea. The rewards for the top 10 are quite generous. Jello thought Lu Chen was aiming for a different ranking. He had no doubt that he could win the championship. The staff who arrived also subdued the thief. The thief who kept shouting became even more angry when he realized that no one paid attention to him. In his excitement, he pulled out his revolver and pointed it at Lu Chen. He was even more resentful of the person who ruined his plan. Lu Chen was startled when he saw the gun pointed at him. He didn't have the same leeway as Jello. This thug, blinded by anger, wouldn't have any sense either. The moment the thief pulled out his gun, Jello reached for the iron ball at his waist. He was convinced that such a person would not have the courage to shoot here, but the person being pointed at was the one who had helped him, so Jello still responded. However, the thief was immediately pinned to the ground by the sheriff. You two are going to participate in the competition, right? I will also participate. I will hinder you along the way. I am much faster than you. As long as I am here, you two will have no chance of winning. Are you two listening? The thief kept shouting. Hearing this, Jello said to the sheriff, "Let him go. I have decided not to sue him. He had to make sure that he won the championship. He had reasons not to lose." Then he kicked the pistol that had fallen to the ground towards the thief and said, "Pick up your gun and fight me like a man. If you really want to cause trouble for me, then show your courage." Duel was a common and legal way to resolve problems in this era, and no one involved had any objection to the solution. The sheriff then let the thieves go, saving them the trouble of solving the problem on their own. The thief picked up his pistol from the ground, cornered by his own words. He was already feeling timid, and Jello's boldness had intimidated him. But the situation had reached this point, and the thief walked out, swearing, "Come on, I'll take your registration fee from your corpse when you're dead." They both walked towards the open space at the entrance. Luchin followed suit. Only the registration staff member felt a little disappointed and couldn't follow. The duel naturally attracted a large crowd of onlookers. The cowboys were a curious bunch, especially since they were idle waiting for the match to begin. Soon, the crowd surrounded the two duelists. No one seemed concerned that someone with poor marksmanship might hit them while they were watching the show. Luchin was searching the crowd for the protagonist, Johnny Joestar, who was sitting in a wheelchair. The real protagonists always made their first appearance in the corners of the comics. End of this chapter. Chapter 2 Storm. Before the sheriff could even speak, the thief had already raised his pistol and was ready to attack. However, Jello, on full alert, was no match for such a trick. One of the iron balls struck the thief's shoulder, leaving a spiral wound. The iron ball then bounced back into Jello's hand. "You'd better put down the gun and go see a doctor. Maybe your arm can be saved." The thief fired angrily, but unexpectedly his arm twisted and the muzzle of the gun turned towards himself. Then he successfully killed himself. Most of the people around dispersed after seeing the duel end. Luchin praised Jia Luo. "Is this the power of spinning? It's really amazing." Jiro couldn't help but ask, "I didn't expect you to see the secret so quickly. Have you ever seen someone use a similar power before?" Although there weren't many people using this power, there were quite a few. So Luchin might have come into contact with someone who used this power. "I've heard of this technique before. I heard that the Zeppelin family has used this power for generations." Luchin couldn't explain that he had only seen it in a comic. And there would be another person who would use this power later. "It seems you know me." Jiro grinned, his gold teeth forming a gleam in his eye. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. This Oriental man might be connected to the opposition in his kingdom. Johnny, in his wheelchair, now came beside the two. He couldn't help but reach out and touch the still spinning iron ball. When the force of the rotation was transmitted to him, he miraculously stood up. However, it only lasted a very brief moment. Johnny couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise. He was overjoyed to be able to stand up again, like a drowning man finally grasping a life-saving straw. He had also heard the previous conversation between the two, so he was very curious about this strange rotation. Johnny asked impatiently, "What is this gyration?" Jia Luo didn't want to answer his question. He said to Luchin, "Thank you for your help earlier." Although that kind of thug wouldn't cause him any trouble, he turned around and walked away. Johnny glanced at Luchin again expectantly. This Oriental man clearly knew about this power. Perhaps he could give him an answer. "Spin is a magical power. Maybe it can help you stand up. But I don't have this technique. You have to hurry and catch up with the gentleman who left." Luchin responded to Johnny's expectations. "Thank you." After saying that, Johnny used all his strength to drive the wheelchair to catch up with the departing Jello. The protagonists' encounter did not change because of Luchin's appearance. The two of them should set out together again to participate in the competition. After getting to know the two protagonists, Luchin left here alone. Their goals were different from his own. so there was no need to follow them now. Just a quick acquaintance would suffice. If he could successfully acquire a stand, he would surely meet them again. This was inevitable, guided by fate. After all, stand users were attracted to each other. After selling his watch to someone, Lucien earned enough money to travel to other places. Watches from the future were still quite valuable. Lucien's behavior made the thugs wary. In this era, the identities of Orientals in this area were not easy to determine. They had no need to cause such trouble. Therefore, all of Lucien's actions went smoothly. The next step was to gain power. After some consideration, Lucien felt that the Saint Spine located near the Kansas City Prairie should be the part he was most likely to obtain, and the rest of the parts were mostly guarded. Alternatively, the Saint's ears and right hand, located on Sweet Sugar Mountain, could easily be obtained. All he had to do was trade the remains to someone else before sunset, and he should have activated them before then. However, Lucien had some doubts about this. He wasn't sure if this brief possession could truly be considered his, and he was hesitant about whether he could activate his substitute. After a brief moment of contemplation, Lucien finally decided to go to Kansas to search for the Saint's Spine. This part was the easiest for him at the moment. He boarded the train to Kansas, and at this moment he was already far ahead of the others. The race hadn't even started yet, and he was already on the train to his destination. Now, except for the Saint's heart in the hands of the president, the rest of the body has probably not been found yet. Lucien spent several days reaching Kansas. The long train journey left him feeling a little tired. Trains in those days weren't particularly comfortable. The moment he stepped off the train, he felt like he was reborn. During the journey, Lucien had already figured out his next move if his plan didn't work out. As far as he knew, the Saint's Spine was buried under the ruins of a nearby grassland, and the ruins were called the Green Tombstone by the locals. After asking the locals for the exact location, Lucien took the appropriate tools and hurried towards the destination. Just as he arrived at the grassland, a huge storm began to envelop the land. The strong winds prevented Lucien from moving forward, and the rain fell on the muddy soil in the wilderness, becoming a huge obstacle to his progress. Every step forward required immense effort. Moving forward in a storm was far more difficult than one might have imagined. But the storm couldn't stop Lucien's actions. Those who dared to participate in extreme sports had the inner awareness of challenging nature. And now, if they could defeat the power of nature, they could gain extraordinary strength. Stand in. Lucien stood up and continued to move forward in the storm. He didn't know how long it took. The moment the storm appeared, the sky became extremely dark. It was probably already approaching evening. The rain soaked Lucien's clothes, and the strong wind continuously blew away his body heat. Every step forward required a tremendous effort of his willpower. Or perhaps it was his willpower that was dragging him forward at this moment. This was perhaps the test the Saint's remains presented him with. No Saint's remains could be obtained at random. The information Lucien knew in advance allowed him to move forward with determination towards his goal. Finally, Lucien found the cemetery. A huge sense of joy filled his heart. When he eagerly dug up the tomb, the spinal column of the Saint's remains suddenly appeared before his eyes. Fate's guidance had quietly changed at this moment. End of this chapter. Chapter 3 Substitute. When Lucien's hand touched the spine, he felt a strong sense of discomfort, and then the spine began to merge into Lucien's body, accompanied by severe tinnitus and dizziness. A figure with pierced hands and a crown of thorns on his head whispered softly in Lucien's ear. "If you believe your heart is determined, don't be confused. Traveler from a foreign land, I hope you can also find your own happiness." The Saint seemed to glance at Lucien at this moment, and then the figure behind him immediately disappeared. However, the words left by the Saint greatly stimulated Lucien, and he seemed to realize his identity as a time traveler. Then Lucien, who had just been on the grassland, suddenly appeared in a small town. A blue and green figure appeared beside him. Its body was shrouded in a fluid, silvery metal. A golden heart could be seen within its partially hollowed-out body, and each arm bore a massive gear. Sharp teeth could be seen on its face, giving it a terrifying, ferocious look. It seemed Luchin was also someone with the same qualifications. His mental strength was sufficient to support him in obtaining a substitute. Therefore, Luchin successfully activated his own substitute. Now his first step had been achieved. Stand, Heart of Steel, destructive power, B speed, A range, C precision, C endurance, B growth, B ability, imparts metallic properties to soft objects it touches. As the substitute emerged, the storm stopped immediately, and the dark clouds quickly dissipated in the sky. The sun began to shine on the earth again, dispelling the chill from Lu Chen's body. Luchin found a nearby rooftop and sat down, breathing in the air deeply. The door in his mind seemed to light up. If he collected all the saints' remains, would the door light up completely? Then he should be able to open this door. However, this would be a very dangerous undertaking. Especially when the remains are completely inside a single person, it would become a human sacrifice. This could cost the victim's life. Therefore, I had to use reasonable means to abandon this portion of the remains first. Once the president had gathered all the remains, I could then seize the complete body. By that time, he might not be able to defeat the president. However, he could definitely find someone to sacrifice after collecting the remains. It didn't have to be Lucy. And perhaps the entire remains of the saint were not needed to illuminate the door in his mind, so he should go to Sugarcane Mountain and try to obtain the remaining parts of the saint. These two parts were also easy to obtain. With this in mind, Luchin began testing his stand's abilities. It was a close-range, powerful stand. Range C allowed it to move approximately 10 meters, far farther than Jotaro's Star Platinum and roughly the same range as Dio's World Attack. The stands shared vision. Furthermore, the Strength B and Speed A attributes wouldn't necessarily be disadvantageous in a head-to-head combat situation. While not a perfect combination of strength and speed, it was still more than adequate. With a casual punch, the stand created a dent in the ground. The stand's ability allows one's clothing to instantly transform into armor, effectively protecting oneself from attack. Even soft objects can acquire the effects of metal. For example, a whip can be wielded like a blade, and objects held in one's hand can be altered to possess metallic properties. And the properties of metal extend beyond just sharpness. After testing his abilities, Luchin decided to find out how the competition was going. He would decide his next move based on how the plot progressed. This race was a national event, so many people should have known about it. Telegraphs travel much faster than horses, not to mention that the race was sponsored by a newspaper company, which would have reported on the details. Luchin shook off the rain and found a small bar. Seeing a soaked customer walk in, the bartender warmly greeted him, saying, "It's been raining heavily here lately, and many people are getting soaked. Come and have a drink to warm yourself up." Luchin sat down on a chair at the bar and replied, "Then give me a drink to warm me up." He then asked curiously, "How is the SBR competition going?" "I heard it already started." The bartender placed a glass of wine in front of Luchin, then casually threw out a newspaper and complained, "The first round of the competition is over. I didn't expect that the first place would be an Indian boy, but the second place is the famous Diego. It can be seen that he is still very dissatisfied with an Indian ranking first." Luchin took the newspaper he casually threw to him and started reading. It seemed that 1/9 of the competition had been completed while he was searching for the saint's remains. Perhaps the second leg of the race was almost over, as this newspaper was already a few days old. They were actually not far from their location, and trains in this era were not much faster than other modes of transportation. At this moment, on a train, a blonde man in gorgeous purple clothes suddenly woke up. The pattern of Luchin picking up the saint's spine in the storm inexplicably appeared in Fawny Valentine's mind. The picture shows an Oriental man picking up the saint's spine in a small town, and a sign showing the town's name is also in the picture. He was somewhat surprised that someone had already obtained a piece of the saint's remains, even though the competition had barely begun. This person was clearly not a participant in this competition. Perhaps he had connections to some other faction, but he wasn't the only one desiring this miracle. Perhaps someone else had already obtained the remains, but he had already sent someone from among the contestants to investigate. However, since I knew someone had already taken part of the body, I should have sent someone to retrieve it. The Oriental man probably didn't know that I knew he had taken the body parts. So now I had the upper hand in intelligence. The president ordered a man wearing a rainbow mask and pigtails beside him, Black Moya, go and retrieve the spine. I saw someone get it near Kansas City. He's an Oriental. He was accompanied by a storm. Perhaps this is related to the ability he gained. Your ability could be of use. Black Moya nodded and replied, I will bring the saint's remains back for you. Then he stood up and walked out of the carriage. At the front of the train sat Style, the organizer of the event, looking like a mere figurehead. The president looked at the backs of his men and said, Don't let me down. End of this chapter. Chapter 4 Rainbow Catcher. Chapter 4 Rainbow Catcher Luchin was about to take a train out of Kansas, but for some reason all trains leaving Kansas had been stopped. So Luchin was going to buy a horse to leave Kansas, but he had a bad feeling that someone might be manipulating all this. He wasn't very rich, so he'd been trying to find a horse these past few days. He knew how to ride a horse. If all else failed, he planned to steal one at night, a task easily accomplished by a stand user. He wasn't exactly a puritanical person. Meanwhile, the assassins sent by the president had already found him. Driven by the power of the state, Black Moya arrived much faster than anyone imagined. It had been raining in Kansas during this time, and perhaps the test the saint's remains had put Luchin through hadn't yet ended. The remains were also eager to be reunited. One day, while Luchin was looking for another way to leave, he suddenly noticed someone standing in midair above him. That person was staring at him intently. Luchin realized that his target was clearly him. Black Moya threw several glass-like blades made of raindrops at Luchin. His substitute, the steel of his body, emerged and he immediately pulled up the cloak behind him to cover himself. In an instant, the cloak became as strong as a steel plate. The blades made of raindrops were easily blocked. After obtaining his stand, Luchin bought a large, thick cloak to protect himself in order to better utilize his abilities. He also bought a long whip, which he couldn't wield yet, but it could still play a certain role under the power of his stand. Then, the substitute's body and mind rushed towards the target, punching through Black Moya's chest. However, it had no effect. His flesh and blood collapsed into pieces at the moment of the punch, dodging the attack. Black Moya then continued to move upwards along the raindrops, with his substitute body steel following closely behind. He dodged all the attacks by using his flesh and blood to collapse. By the time Black Moya stood on the raindrops high in the sky, Luchin's double's range could no longer capture him. After realizing that his double couldn't hit Black Moya with a close-range attack, Luchin deliberately controlled his range to about 8 meters. Maybe I can use this distance difference to catch him off guard later. Black Moya was extremely cautious about the enemy before him. He didn't know any intelligence about them, so he wouldn't rush down. He raised his pistol and fired repeatedly at Luchin below. The sturdy cloak blocked all the bullets. Luchin had a natural intelligence advantage here. He knew the abilities of almost everyone here. Aside from the Civil War's abilities, which were impossible to understand after just one look, Luchin knew every other enemy's abilities clearly. The gains and losses of intelligence are extremely fatal in the battle between stand users. At this moment, Luchin did not dare to move casually. He was not sure which drop of rain in front of him was controlled by Black Moya. If he moved rashly, he would only get scratched. As long as you enter any house, the enemy will be helpless against you. Or you can hold on until the heavy rain stops. Before this, his cloak should be able to help him withstand all attacks from Black Moya. Black Moya's stand's active attack ability is actually not very strong, and the stand will observe the surrounding situation for him. Black Moya, who was standing overhead, spoke up. Can I ask you a question? How do you know the saint's remains are here, and who is standing behind you? The president had a map of the body parts, but he couldn't find every single one precisely. Yet, this man had actually found a part. He must know something. It's really rude to stand on someone else's head. Why don't you come down and I'll tell you what I know? Lu Chen decided to give him a good beating as soon as he came down. Since you don't want to tell me, I'll just take the body parts back. After saying that, Black Moya threw a grenade over Lu Chen's head. After seeing that the dagger made of bullets and rain had no effect, Black Moya chose a more powerful attack method. It depends on whether he can block the explosion. Lu Chen's stand-in punched the thrown grenade away. An explosion resounded within the city, and the violent impact spread outwards. A few drops of rain were firmly suspended in the air, unaffected by the shockwave. These were the raindrops controlled by Black Moya. If they were caught off guard and hit, they would surely suffer great damage. Black Moya looked at Lu Chen's actions and realized that the power of the explosion was unstoppable by the enemies below, otherwise he would not have had to throw the grenade away. His stand's range of movement is about 8 meters. His abilities are similar to those of Majit's 20th century boys. It doesn't seem as effective as his, as Majit isn't afraid of any attack. Why don't you move? Can you move when you activate your ability? You have to stay still when your stand is moving. Black Moya speculated about his ability. Do you think I will tell you? Guess it yourself. Although many stand users will explain their abilities to the enemy, Lu Chen is not such a person. My own actions of guarding against his raindrops had caused him to misjudge the situation. This was probably also related to Majit. For a moment, neither side was able to do anything to the other. Black Moya observed the enemy below for a moment, then, as if on a whim, pulled out a piece of paper and began writing something. As he put the note away, a change occurred. Raindrops streamed down Black Moya's cheeks. His flesh began to disintegrate. Parts of his limbs began to fall with the rain. His hand and the note he had just written appeared next to a pigeon cage. He wanted to pass on Lu Chen's information. While Lu Chen was captivated by this action, another portion of Black Moya's flesh and blood had already fallen onto his cloak with the raindrops. It flowed down along the trail of the rain. His teeth suddenly appeared on Lu Chen's leg and bit down fiercely. Intense pain immediately set in. Lu Chen immediately gave his pants the solidity of metal. Previously, because he was prepared to move at any time, Lu Chen had not given his pants the properties of metal. After all, it is not easy to move something solid. The substitute hit Black Moya's teeth, and his flesh and blood collapsed and disappeared in the rain. End of this chapter. Chapter 5 Intelligence. Chapter 5 Intelligence. Black Moya's teeth noticed the moment Lu Chen's clothes changed and realized that he had not fully protected himself. The enemy must have changed the state of his clothes to protect himself. You protect yourself by changing the material of your clothes, right? He felt that he had seen through Lu Chen's ability. You can guess for yourself. I won't reveal information about my stand casually. Maybe I'm just transferring the damage. I understand. Let me see if you have the resolve to hold the saint's remains. Several daggers made of rain were thrown towards Lu Chen below. Lu Chen covered himself completely with his cloak, leaving no part of his body exposed. The dagger of the rain didn't strike the cloak. He wasn't aiming at Lu Chen, but at the puddle that had accumulated beside him. The raindrops fell into the puddle and then jumped up again. These were also raindrops. The raindrops hit Lu Chen's pants, making a sound like metal clashing. Ever since Lu Chen realized that he might be able to bypass his cloak and attack him, he had made all his clothes as hard as armor. Black Moya's plan hadn't worked. It seems that your plan did not succeed. It will be useless for you to stand there all the time. According to my observations over the past few days, the rain should be stopping soon. Lu Chen said sarcastically, trying to provoke the enemy who had been standing above his head to come down. Black Moya realized that the enemy had figured out his stand's abilities, but he began to bluff. He remained calm and said, "As long as there's water, I can keep using my stand abilities, so you don't have to worry too much about me. And how long can your abilities last?" I hope it's the same as you said. Lu Chen actually knew his ability from the beginning, so of course he knew he was lying. The situation was exactly as Lu Chen said. The rain in the sky was lighter than before. So Black Moya couldn't stand on the raindrops above Lu Chen's head. He decided to move to another location. The telephone pole not far away was a good choice. Whether the rain would stop or not, he could keep his distance from Lu Chen. The substitute body steel flew towards Black Moa, who was standing on the telephone pole. It seemed that due to the lack of distance, he could only vent his dissatisfaction on the distant electric wires. At that moment, a spark flashed, and Black Moya was actually injured by the current. He had often stood on the poles before, so he naturally knew which places were not to be touched. But now was not the time to think about it. Black Moya, who was standing on the electric pole, endured the damage caused by the voltage of about 110 V and jumped out from the pole again. The soft outer covering of the electric wires would change the moment it collided with the steel of Lu Chen's stand-in body. Lu Chen was waiting for him to stand on the electric pole like in the comics. Conductivity is also a property of metals, and Lu Chen had just imparted this property to the insulating outer covering of the wire. In an instant, the insulating covering was no longer insulating, and Black Moya came into direct contact with the exposed wire. Furthermore, he was still covered in rainwater. Rainwater, as in pure water, is also an excellent conductor. At the moment of falling, Black Moa realized that the information he had just passed on was wrong, and this wrong information might lead to the death of others. Black Moya, enduring the pain, stopped midair on the raindrops. He gasped for air, his mind already hazy. The raindrops beneath his feet could easily fall back down. The 110 V voltage wasn't immediately fatal. Black Moya's leap was timely, but the pain briefly blinded him, and the raindrops, trapped in the air, began to fall. The opportunity Lu Chen had been waiting for was now. He ran towards Black Moa, and his substitute body steel immediately emerged and flew towards the enemy quickly. The electric current paralyzed Black Moya's nerves, slowing his reaction speed. In this situation, he couldn't quickly avoid the damage by letting the raindrops reassemble his flesh and blood. The speed of the substitute's body steel was A-level. At this moment, a series of heavy punches were thrown. Lu Chen suppressed the urge of himself and his stand-in to shout strangely, which made him feel a little embarrassed. Black Moya, wounded, struggled to let the rain wash away part of his torso. He couldn't let his erroneous information be passed back to mislead his teammates. The rain once again carried away a portion of Black Moya's body. He also opened another pigeon cage, but now he had no chance to write any more intelligence. So he drew a mark on the pigeon with his own blood, hoping the president would understand his meaning. Under the continuous heavy punches, the mask on Black Moya's face shattered. Black Moya, who had been barely able to stay aloft by the raindrops, began to fall. He finally had no way to control the raindrops. As the dove took off, Black Moya fell heavily to the ground. He had done everything he could, hoping that the president could bring ultimate happiness to the country. At this time, the rain stopped and a rainbow appeared in the distant sky. Black Moa looked at the rainbow in the distance and stretched out his hand to try to grasp it, muttering to himself, "It's a pity that I can't catch that beautiful rainbow after all." Unfortunately, rainbows only appear after rain, so he will never be able to catch one. Lu Chen walked over to Black Moya and looked at the first enemy before him. He was not completely dead yet. When the dove flew towards the rainbow, his hand fell to the ground. Black Moya also fulfilled his awareness. Here everyone fights for their own beliefs. At the moment of Black Moya's death, the door in Lu Chen's mind also became a little brighter. It seems that it is not only the remains of saints that can recharge the door. Death also has the same function, or perhaps the death of a stand user. Lu Chen stepped forward and snatched the revolver from Black Moya's body. Now it was his trophy. The pistol had a remarkable performance in this film. In other films, however, the stand users were almost not afraid of bullets. After further searching, he found a few more coins. He didn't carry anything else. Lu Chen placed the fallen umbrella on Black Moya and strode towards the city gate. Since the enemy had found him, it meant he had been exposed to the president's sight. He didn't know why the president knew of his existence, but now there was no way to proceed with his leisurely plans. Fate would always bring those who possessed the remains together. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Heading to Sugar Candy Mountain. Chapter 6. Heading to Sugar Candy Mountain. Behind an inn near the city gate, Lu Chen found an unattended horse. He used his double to open the stable door and carefully led the horse out. According to current laws, stealing livestock is punishable by hanging. So Luchin doesn't want to be caught, otherwise he might end up infiltrating like in Assassin's Creed. But everything went smoothly and no one realized that a horse had been stolen by a double. Luchin mounted his horse and headed towards the Great Lakes. With a patchy map to rely on, he could only take things one step at a time. Staying put would inevitably lead to the next assassin. Especially during the Civil War, Luchin didn't want to encounter one at all. He had never understood this stand-in thing when he was reading the comics. Such an unkillable enemy was difficult to deal with. As for the Saints' remains in Kansas, turning back wouldn't be enough to get them. So, I'd just wait near the Great Lakes for the others carrying the remains to arrive. Those people were probably moving much faster than I was. After all, they were participating in a speed race. After making the decision, Luchin started riding his horse along the road on the map. Just as Luchin was moving forward, the pigeon released by Black Moa had returned to the president's side. The two pigeons arrived at the president's hands almost at the same time. The first pigeon brought a note that stated the enemy's capabilities, while the second pigeon carried nothing but a bloodstain on its feathers. By this time, the third stage had begun, and the body's left hand seemed to have been taken. The president thought for a moment and felt that the two pigeons sent by Black Moya must have their own ideas. It was possible that what he wrote on the first note was incorrect, so he released another pigeon. If that were the case, Black Moya had definitely been defeated. The president was mentally prepared for this, after all. He hadn't been able to contact Black Moya in the past few days. The president felt somewhat short-handed. Apart from those already dispatched, there were hardly any stand users left. And sending only ordinary assassins to deal with the stand users would be nearly ineffective. The unexpected enemy who was able to defeat Black Moya must be very powerful, so he cannot send out weak subordinates. The president was furious after receiving two pieces of bad news in a row. Johnny and Jiro disappeared, and the Saint's spine was not obtained. This made him feel that his plan was out of control. Call back all my stand users. We need to all work together now. Gather everyone to Kansas. We need to adjust the plan there. The silver-haired man beside him nodded quickly. Don't worry, Mr. President. I will have them come here as quickly as possible. The president nodded and asked again, why hasn't Linka's pigeon returned yet? With Linka's ability, there's no way there could be a problem. It's a pity that the hot air balloon didn't see anyone. There are too many people participating in this event, a full 2,000 people, which is a big difference from the 500 people we expected. So it is difficult for the hot air balloon to monitor everyone. The followers on the side were unable to answer Link's question. Link was not an easy person to get along with among them. Perhaps someone betrayed us. I believe the person who planned this event will definitely betray us. Send someone to execute him secretly. The president casually decided the life of a person, even if that person was considered a high-ranking figure by others. Steve Steele possesses rare talents, and this operation cannot be without him. If he were to disappear, the entire operation would be thrown into chaos. Then, the operation would be impossible to proceed. The silver-haired man explained the current difficulties. Then keep him for now and execute him after everything is over. Perhaps we should send another person to hold back that Oriental man? I'll consider that. I must get the Saint's spine. It's the most important part. Indeed, before everything was ready, someone had to stop this mysterious Oriental man, lest he escape with the Saint's remains. He even considered whether he should personally retrieve the remains. The president quickly came up with a plan. He had recently acquired a subordinate, and even losing him wouldn't be a big deal. So, let him do this. Those people weren't part of the country he'd sworn to protect. Furthermore, their presence was an obstacle to manifest destiny. So, let him serve as a sacrifice. When the president and the others were discussing how to proceed with the plan, everything they planned was seen by a person outside the window. Luchin had been walking towards the Great Lakes for several days. Unfortunately, he had no experience traveling alone on horseback, so he was not making fast progress along the way. Luchin had done his best to bring everything he needed, but he still felt like he didn't have enough. Especially since he wasn't familiar with the stolen horse, making the journey extremely difficult. After walking for many days, Luchin finally arrived near the shore of Lake Michigan. The next step was to find the Hugh Mandan Spring to exchange the saint's ears and right hand for his. Or he should wait here for Johnny and Jello to use the saint's remains in exchange for his own. After all, the conditions here are to spend all the items. For this, I can exchange the saint's spine for them. On the way here, Luchin carefully considered the various details in the comics. It seemed that the complete remains of the saint could only be nurtured by Lucy. She herself was the head of the saint. If the various parts of the body are not handed over to her, it is very likely that the complete body of the saint will not appear. Perhaps the person chosen by the saint is Lucy. If this is really the case, then I should find a way to hand over the body in a reasonable way. Luchin decided to eat first, so he sat under a big tree and ate the simple food he brought with him, some biscuits and dried meat. He also made a fire and brewed some extremely bitter cowboy coffee to refresh himself. He also wondered what stage the competition was at. Where were the protagonists now? Although Luchin was familiar with the comic's plot, he couldn't remember the time period clearly. He didn't know how long each stage of the competition took. End of this chapter. Chapter 7: The Way of Silence. Chapter 7: The Way of Silence. Just as Luchin was considering his next move, the tree he was leaning against was cut off. The tree fell with a loud noise. Luchin was startled and immediately jumped to the other side. Strange words began to gather towards him in front of him. Luchin immediately realized that he was under attack by a stand. This was clearly the Sound Man's way of silence. Although he didn't know why he was in this position, he knew that the enemy he faced this time was also a strong opponent. The way of silence can attach onomatopoeia to anything, and the words carrying the onomatopoeia possess corresponding power. When the object carrying the onomatopoeia collides with another object, the corresponding power is manifested in that object. The tree just now was struck by the sound of cutting. Luchin thought it was the fire he had built that had exposed his position, but now was not the time to draw conclusions. He had to respond immediately. He didn't know if the attacking enemy had any companions. In the comics, Sound Man sets out with Diego. Even without his teammates, his abilities are very restrained. Sound Man's voice can easily cut through metal. His own stand abilities are no match in this situation. The substitute body steel then emerged and looked around, and soon noticed that most of these sound characters were floating down from the upwind direction. Luchin knew that the place where these strange characters were most densely populated should be the direction where the Sound Man's body was, and the precision of his substitute was not high. Through his stand-in's keen observation, Luchin realized that the Sound Man had attached the sound to the leaves, and the wind had carried the leaves over. The enemy was upwind. So Luchin threw the biscuit in his hand towards the place where the words were most densely packed. After the biscuit hit the words, it immediately broke into powder and burned. The sound person mixed together several different words with different effects. He himself should be hiding behind a tree behind the dense text. Luchin ran a few quick steps toward that direction. He saw densely packed leaves carrying sounds floating in the woods ahead. The sound person was standing in the woods in the distance, watching him quietly. Enon was the first to speak after seeing Luchin. "Hand over the body, and I will not take your life. Otherwise, I can cut you into pieces with just one blow." Luchin responded by raising his gun and firing at the Sound Man. The bullet was shattered by the sound before it reached the Sound Man. However, this also confirmed that he was alone. Without Diego, the Sound Man's intimidation was less powerful. Without other help, the text he recorded the sound with would not move very fast. Previously, he relied on the wind to transport these things to his side. Luchin looked at the words in the air while moving forward carefully. Suddenly, a wound appeared on Luchin's left leg. At the same time, a feeling of nausea emerged, accompanied by a sense of loss of balance. Yes, Sound Man can also create invisible sounds. These are probably the effects of infrasound or ultrasound. Luchin realized that he had definitely collided with the sound he had made. And what was he recording these invisible sounds on? This wasn't underwater, so he didn't have a very convenient way to record the sounds. Luchin quickly glanced around and was sure that he had not touched any leaves. He threw another biscuit forward, and as it hit the ground, it shattered. The sound man recorded that invisible sound on the dirt. He had already set a trap here, waiting for the prey to find it. Perhaps there were more traps in the dirt behind him, leaving a path for himself. The substitute body steel picked up a stone and rolled it forward, and it was quickly shattered. However, the path the stone had rolled over was safe. Seeing his trap had been discovered, Einrun no longer held back. He threw a stone forward. It struck the words depicting the sound of an explosion, and an explosion immediately occurred. Under the impact of the explosion, the leaves with words on them began to float towards Luchin quickly. Luchen's stand-in suddenly punched the tree beside him, and the leaves flew in the direction of the force. When the leaves were about to touch the words, they all became hard. Of course, the soft leaves could trigger the substitute's steel effect. Suddenly, the woods erupted in a cacophony of sounds, explosions, slicing, and burning. The sturdy leaf fragments fell to the ground, triggering another attack. It was indeed a dangerous place. Burning leaves set fire to the dry branches on the ground. Smoke rose from the woods. After the sounds on the leaves triggered each other, Luchin fired several shots at the sound person. Because Luchin had no experience with firearms, and at this distance, even experienced marksmen couldn't hit accurately. Experienced marksmen like Link had to move within 5 steps before firing. The bullet didn't even graze Einren's side. It deflected by a significant distance. However, Lu Chen's main purpose in firing was to attract Einren's attention. The moment the gunshot sounded, the audience's attention was drawn to the bullet. This is human instinct. At the same time, Heartsteel slammed the tree again, using the hardened leaves to pave a safe path for itself. Luchin also took the opportunity to collect many leaves. Luchin rushed forward quickly along this safe road. Einren wasn't afraid, for he was a seasoned Indian warrior. He drew his dagger. His stand materialized behind him. Crucially, he knew next to nothing about his stand, and his own stand's strength and speed were the same as a normal human's. So in his impression, everyone's stand should be like this. Of course, the president would not explain the various abilities of the stand to him. In other words, he did not have enough information. The sound man's stand-in continued to make sounds of cutting, explosion, and burning. Luchin continued to throw those leaves forward like flying knives. As long as he could touch the sounds in advance, the sound man would not be in any danger. The sounds in front of the sound man were touched off one by one. The impact of the explosion was partially blocked by Lu Chen's cloak. Soon the two of them were very close, and the distance between them was getting closer and closer. The distance was within 10 meters. Heartsteel suddenly accelerated and punched the sound man's stand-in with a heavy punch. Then came the continuous blows like raindrops. End of this chapter. Chapter 8 Sandman? Sound Man. Chapter 8 Sandman? Sound Man. The Sandman's stand was beaten so hard he couldn't fight back. He quickly released the stand and knelt on the ground. He threw the dagger in his hand at Luchin. The stand punched the dagger away. Then he punched the sound man again, knocking him to the ground. Luchin did not kill the sound man, so the damage caused by the stand-in's punch was not serious. Then he walked to Einren and deliberately asked, "Your name is Sandan, right? Shouldn't you be participating in the SBR competition? Why did you come here to attack me? Who ordered you to do it?" Of course, Luchin knew all these questions. The Indian boy lying on the ground said viciously, "Sandman is just a derogatory name given to me by those white bandits. My real name is Soundman, the one who plays sounds. You, an Oriental, will never understand me." Luchin immediately retorted, "You hate white people, yet you know full well that I'm from the East. You harbor hatred for white people, yet you vent your violence on me. So, how is your hatred for me any different from that of those bandits you're talking about? I'm just here to complete the mission. I don't hold any grudge against you. Go ahead. I won't tell you anything. Don't even think about learning anything from me." Luchin squatted down and stared into Einren's eyes and asked, President Valentine asked you to come, right? Enern was not panicked by this. The grudges and hatreds between other people had nothing to do with him. He just wanted to make money to buy back his land. If you come to kill others, you must be prepared to be killed. Since you have lost, you must be prepared to give up your life. He is not afraid of death. He only feels regret for his sister and hopes that she can be happy in the future. Seeing that Enon didn't answer, Luchin asked again, "Do you know what the president asked you to seize?" "Some of the remains, I don't know whose they belong to. He also told me that your ability should be related to defense. It seems that this is not the case." There was a hint of dissatisfaction in the tone of Enrin. "You think he cheated on you?" Enrin felt that the possibility of him being deceived was not very high. After all, the president should also hope that he could successfully bring back the body. "I wonder what the president has promised you? If I help him get his body back, I can get enough money to buy back our land. Give up this dream. No one will go forward with you in the direction you are going now. And never believe that you can buy back your tribal land with money. The white people are waging a war against you. You will never achieve your goal through trade alone. Your very existence is a sin against them." Luchin gave him advice. This was a dream doomed to fail. The man fell silent again. He had previously tried to imitate the white man's ways, but today this Oriental man told him that all that was wrong, especially since what he said seemed to make sense. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Luchin continued to ask, "Perhaps you should go back and visit your tribe? Aren't you going to kill me?" Enrin was a little surprised. In his worldview, it was normal for the loser to die. Luchin did not answer directly but asked, "Let me ask you a question. How long do you think your tribe can survive? Though our lives are a little difficult, we can still hold on. So we should be able to hold out for a long time." Enrin was optimistic. "Then let me tell you, they won't survive more than half a year before being wiped out." Luchin glanced at Enrin's increasingly unsightly face and continued. "And guess who would do it? Someone would impose civilization on you and call it manifest destiny." The Enon roared, "This is impossible. Nothing will happen to my tribe." "You actually believe it, right? If you go back now, you can at least save your sister. With your newfound power, you and your sister can definitely survive. Anyway, I don't see how important the rest of the tribesmen are to you. They wanted to punish you before." Luchen's voice was like a poisonous snake tempting Eve. "How do you know all this?" Enern was obviously getting panicked. It was impossible for this person to know so much about him. It was as if he was watching everything. "Think carefully about your sister. She believed in you so much. Even though she knew it was impossible, she still gave you the ancestral gem. Perhaps she hoped you could leave that place where you were doomed to die." Enrin's tone became very excited. "What do you know? Why do you know all this?" It can be seen that he has begun to collapse. Sure enough, his sister is his weak spot. "Now you understand what we're fighting for. All of this was told to me by God, of course. Your tribe is about to be destroyed. If you die here, then in a month everything you value will be gone, including your sister. She will die with the happiness of your victory, unaware that you've already perished in the wilderness." Luchin was like a charlatan, talking to himself with a pious look in his eyes. Anyway, the musicians now had no power to resist. Enrin, on the other hand, calmed down. Although this Oriental man was talking nonsense, he must have his own needs if he didn't kill him. His life itself was valuable to him. "Why are you willing to let me go? Since he needs me to live, then he certainly won't mind if I offend him. And he will definitely be willing to answer my question. Although you are not my friend, there is someone who will definitely become your enemy. And that person happens to be my enemy. I won't help you deal with the president. The entire country is behind him." Enrin supported himself with his hands and answered, "Once you have nothing, you won't be afraid of possible retaliation." Enrin frowned and asked, "Whose body are you stealing? What kind of power does he have?" He felt that if the god he was talking about really had divine power, then the body would definitely be able to save his people. Luchin didn't answer his question but continued, "Let's go, while there's still a chance. Go save your sister. Then go find the president and ask for clarification. I hope you can survive until then. What if I keep following you? Then you will lose your sister. Every moment from now on is precious. I hope you can rush back when your tribe is destroyed, instead of a day or an hour later. Luchin ignored the revenge in Ainrin's words. Seeing that Luchin was really unwilling to answer his questions, Ainrin stood up while enduring the pain in his body and then started running towards his hometown. Before leaving, he left a message. If what you said is true, I will find a way to repay your kindness later. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Johnny Luchin watched the Sandman walk away, wondering if he could be of any use to him later. But the fact that he was alive was enough to attract the attention of a certain president. If an assassin sent out escaped control after contact with the target, it was obviously a problem, so he would definitely find a way to figure it out. I hope Ainrin can return when his tribe has just been destroyed, so that he will definitely develop the most intense hatred towards the president. Hatred is the most powerful driving force. His love for his family will eventually transform into rage and be unleashed upon the president, especially now that he has the ability to do so. This will draw a significant portion of the president's attention, making his subsequent actions much more convenient. And if he succeeded in rescuing his sister, given his personality, he would probably be grateful to me. No matter what the outcome, Luchin had already received his reward the moment Sandman returned to the tribe. After that, it was just a matter of how much profit he would make. After the Sandman's back was completely out of sight, Luchin prepared to go back and take all his things away. The thick smoke from the burning would definitely attract many people to come and check it out. Just as he put away his kettle, Luchin realized that someone else had come here. Then he looked up and saw that it was Johnny and Jiro. This surprised him. Was he really so slow? Not only did the sound man catch up, but now even Johnny and Jello appeared here. Then almost all the main characters should be around here by now. However, the remains of the saints will all appear here, and then the scramble will begin. When the two men saw the person standing there and knew him, they rode their horses closer and closer. So Luchin stopped packing his things and stood there waiting for the two to approach. The two men rode their horses and stopped beside Luchin. Luchin was the first to greet the two protagonists with a smile. We meet again. I didn't expect to see you here. Luchin really didn't expect to see them here. He had originally planned to wait here for a few days for the contestants to participate in the competition. Johnny immediately realized from the saint's remains in his left hand that the Oriental man he had met at the starting point also held a saint's remains. This was a mutual induction between the remains. Furthermore, by this time, Jiro had already revealed who the saint's remains belonged to. So this Oriental guy who didn't participate in the competition came here directly for the body parts? I didn't expect to see you here. Johnny looked at Luchin thoughtfully. Were you fighting someone earlier? He whispered to Jello that the man in front of him had a piece of the saint's remains. You encountered an assassin. I guess your journey wasn't smooth, was it? Luchin also realized that Johnny had not lost the saint's left hand, so they must have suffered several attacks. They knew the answer to this question. Jiro asked directly, you knew about this before you participated in the competition, right? It was obvious that this Oriental man was not sent by the Vatican, but he recognized himself as a member of the Zeppeli family at a glance. The person in front of me is not simple. Luchin looked at Jiaoluo and replied with a hint of meaning. If you ask that, then I do know about this. And I'm not the only one who knows about this. Obviously, there are other people who know about it, such as the person who organized this event. Jello shook his head and said, I know who is behind all this. Maybe he is not the same person as you are talking about. They had met Lucy before, so they naturally knew that Mr. Steele was just a target set up in the open by the president. I think it's the same person. Your goal from the beginning was to find the saint's remains, right? You know the location of the remains. Do you have the missing map? Jello knew that there was a missing map. Don't you think the route of this race is a coincidence? The map must be in the hands of the organizers. Jello agreed with this answer. Combined with Lucy's previous intelligence, it was obvious that the president was the one behind all this. But what role did this Oriental man play in this? Johnny blurted out, then how do you know all this? Why would an Oriental like you come here to look for the remains of a saint? Luchin replied as a matter of course, isn't this the welfare of all mankind? Then I naturally have the right to touch it. Then his face suddenly darkened. Aren't you participating in a competition? Or are you here to compete with me for the saint's remains? As soon as these words were spoken, a substitute, Yawan, immediately appeared behind Johnny. He was ready to strike if things went wrong. Furthermore, he also wanted the saintly remains of the man before him. No one could stop his determination to stand up again. Seeing this, Jello reached out and patted Johnny, indicating that now was not a good time to take action. Luchin didn't panic. Instead, he reached out and took out the copper kettle from the bag on his horse's back. Then he shook it and asked the two of them, "Would you like a cup of coffee?" "I just made it." Jello threw the cup in his pocket over and said, "Give me a drink then." Johnny was still a little wary of the tense situation just now. He looked a little surprised, but he still took the substitute back. After Luchin took the cup, he poured a cup of coffee for Jello with his own kettle and handed it back. After taking the cup, Jello said to Johnny, "Don't you want to drink something to refresh yourself? We still have a long way to go today." It was obvious that Jello didn't have to worry about Luchin poisoning him. So Johnny handed his cup to Luchin, and he also got a cup of extremely bitter coffee. Jiro took a sip of coffee and continued asking, "Now you can tell us why you know so many unusual things." "All of this was naturally told to me by God. Every step I take forward is guided personally by the saint." Luchin made a pious expression. "Really?" Jello was a little skeptical. "Haven't you heard the guidance of the saint?" "I got a piece of the saint's remains a long time ago, and since then I have often been able to hear the saint's guidance to me. I always feel that I am the one chosen by the saint." These lies were beyond their ability to expose. Both of them had heard the saint's whispers when they obtained the saint's remains, so what Luchin said was possible. According to what Lucy said, the president was also sending people to hunt down the Oriental man in front of him, so it can be known that Luchin is not his enemy at the moment. End of this chapter. Chapter 10, Destiny. What did the saints tell you? And why are you at the starting point of the race? Jiro asked, wondering if anyone in the Vatican knew about this Oriental man. Hetpans was clearly sent by the Vatican. She seemed unaware of Luchin's existence. The saint told me that if I followed the race route, I would be able to witness the miracles he performed. However, since I am not a good rider, I set out by train. Jiro glanced at Johnny. They had seen many miracles caused by corpses on the road, but he always felt that the words of this Oriental man were full of lies. This was his intuition. Although Luchin acted fanatical, he could tell that he wasn't devout. After all, who would take a train on a pilgrimage? Johnny thought for a moment and asked, "I also obtained a part of the remains, but I only heard a few words of revelation. Why were you able to hear so many revelations?" He thought that the saint seemed to have only said one sentence to him. "Perhaps it's because you are determined in your heart, while I am confused. Saints always guide the confused." "So you came here specifically to witness the miracles of the saint?" Johnny looked at Luchin's facial expression suspiciously, trying to find evidence that he was lying. "No, I want to obtain another part of the saint's remains. I pray that the saint can give me more instructions." Luchin stated his goal frankly. The two of them probably wouldn't try desperately to seize the saint's remains from others. After all, they knew Diego also had an eyeball. "Have you got any clues?" Jello asked casually and didn't expect Luchin to answer him. "Of course. There's a portion of the saint's remains nearby, which is why I'm searching for them. But if you two can find it, I won't fight with you. The remains will choose their own owner. Whoever gets it will be God's will." Luchin told the two of them some of the information and at the same time established an image for himself that was in line with God's will. The two were surprised that Luchin actually told them all the information he knew. Johnny said solemnly, "Even if you tell me the information, I won't return the body to you once I find it. Of course, the body belongs to whoever finds it." Luchin seemed quite open-minded about this, knowing that whoever found the body couldn't keep it. This was because it was a test from a saint, or perhaps a test from the Hugo Mandan Spring. To obtain it, one must first give it up. It didn't matter who found it first. Jiro thought for a moment and asked, "Do you know how many copies of the saint's remains your attackers found?" He had only heard from Lucy that the president possessed a saint's heart. He didn't know the details of the situation now. But they weren't the only ones searching. Hurt Pans and Diego were also searching for the remains. The moment he saw Luchin, Jello realized that there might be other people looking for the body. Luchin was not sure how the president was doing now. He remembered that the legs in the comics were obtained by the stand messenger he sent out. Then he shook his head at the two of them and said, "I don't know. The saint didn't tell me this." "Do you really think the saint chose you?" Johnny was very curious about this. "I think so." Just as they were talking, the burning caused by the Soundman's stand ability began to gradually extinguish. The smell of fireworks gradually dissipated, and the surroundings became quiet again. A rabbit, dodging something, appeared near the three of them. Johnny immediately created a substitute when he saw it, and then fired his claw bullet, successfully hitting the unfortunate rabbit. His action might be to show Luchin the strength of his side. Luchin looked at his actions and felt that there might be a pull of fate here. With this rabbit, he might be able to exchange it for the saint's ears and right hand. Jello jumped off his horse, walked over and picked up the rabbit that had been shot, then shook it towards Luchin and said, "It's a very fat rabbit. I'm sure it can be made into a pot full of stew. Just consider it as a reward for the cup of coffee. You can use it to make a lucky rabbit's foot, which will definitely bring you luck. So you should keep the rabbit for yourself." Luchin thought of the saint's right hand and rejected his suggestion. Although this rabbit appeared here out of misfortune, or perhaps it was drawn here by fate. Jiro seemed to sense something from this. It seems that the saint has indeed said a lot to you. Don't you need luck? Believe me, luck is the most important thing on this journey, so don't share your luck with others. Luchin thought that only Pucklock, who was focused on the competition, would be the final winner. It was as if the goddess of luck was sitting on his horse. After saying that, Luchin looked at Jiro's horseback. Was his death in the comics because he shared his luck with others? Just as he said, Jia Luo followed Luchin's gaze and looked at his horse's back. He said jokingly, "Can you believe it? The goddess of luck is sitting behind my horse." "I believe." This made Jello a little confused about how to answer. Generally speaking, no one would answer this question in this way. "Will you come with us?" Johnny invited Luchin after seeing Jiro's awkwardness. He was still very concerned about the saint's remains on Luchin's body. Although he wouldn't take them away right away, he still hoped Luchin would stay by his side. "You're still going to participate in the SBR competition, right?" "Actually, my riding skills aren't very good. If I follow you, I'll definitely slow you down. You all have reasons to win, so let me walk slowly behind you, and I'll take the train later." Luchin rejected the invitation to go with them. If he walked with these two people without the aura of the protagonist, something bad would definitely happen. Jiro waved at Luchin and said, "We'll be leaving first. I hope to see you again somewhere in the future. When I become the champion, I'll treat you to a drink in New York. You'll definitely be there then, right? Fate will always bring us together again, and it won't be long. I'm afraid we'll meet before the end." Johnny also waved to Luchin, and the two of them walked away along the road. Luchin also gathered his belongings, then mounted his horse and slowly followed the two men. The moment the rabbit suddenly appeared, Luchin knew for sure they would find the Hugo Mandan Spring. This was the mission the saint had given them. End of this chapter.